Hello, internet coin enthusiasts, and welcome back to the NGMI podcast. Today, my guest is No.One. Not literally, that is just his name. No.One is a psychoanalyst. He has a PhD in psychoanalytic theory. He's a long-time degen and crypto investor, and most interestingly, he's quite skeptical of a lot of the activity that we see in crypto today, particularly when it comes to meme coins. In this episode, we discuss the major problems that crypto as an industry is yet to overcome, the economics of crypto assets, financial nihilism, why meme coins are a perverse structure in psychoanalytic theory, and much more. It's been a while since I've released an episode of this podcast, but I've delayed releasing this one so that I can have a backlog and publish episodes more regularly. I've got a lot more coming over the next few weeks. I've booked in some pretty solid guests, so make sure you subscribe on whatever platform you're listening on right now so you don't miss out on the good stuff. Without further ado, today's guest, No.One. No.One, thanks for coming on the show, dude. Really glad to have you on.
My pleasure, mate. My pleasure. Long time coming.
Yeah.
In some respects.
a long time coming. Dude, let's get straight into it. What's the problems with crypto right now?
I guess it depends on the angle you look at it from. I mean, some people would say the old school head's nothing really. It's just doing what it does. But it certainly has, I guess I see more of the social identity problem that's coming out through crypto especially. And I think that's more to do with its own identity, internal. And that's what you see a lot nowadays with the infighting, if you will, between utility versus just over-financialization of everything. And so I think that is probably its biggest difficulty outside of the sort of limitations of computing and this sort of thing, which I think is actually probably a strength in the end, and how it really started back in the day. But really it doesn't, I'm not sure the cryptocurrency sector really knows what it wants to be. There is this idea of, Ethereum being a global computer or whatever they're saying nowadays. Bitcoin's a store of value. It's a gold rivaling asset, which it probably will go into the future and that sort of thing.
Which is a reasonable jump to make. But it has changed significantly from day one because it was supposed to be it was imagined as a currency. And I mean, inherent in that is a store of value if you think about the kind of internal stuff that Satoshi would have been sticking in it, like the actual underlying ideology of it being a safeguard against the whole rent-seeking '08 shit. But
yeah, I guess it's interesting because that first block mined had what the headline of the paper, like Chancellor bails out banks or something like this. So already inherently there is some sort of quite overt critique of the financial system within it. And I think that really came down to sort of transparency and what happened in '08, where essentially all these banks, subprime loans was also in the movie, did all this nefarious stuff. And no one really noticed until it was too late, essentially. And I think a lot of Bitcoin and being developed was to sort of, I guess, a revolt against that. It was, let's go for transparency of the institutions or the actual financial activity while individuals can be private. And this is what I found really fascinating when I came in crypto and actually paid attention, because I first heard about Bitcoin way back in 2012, 2013. Some associates were on Silk Road and other things. Even a family member has multiple Bitcoin locked somewhere on a computer that he can't access, that he was using back then in gaming and other things, But I didn't really pay attention. I was too busy doing other stuff. But yeah, really, it was developed to sort of a critique, if you will. It was against something. It had an ideological reason for it existing. For me, it was a technological solution to more of a philosophical problem. And I think that's where it falls short in the end. But without naming it, it kind of was aiming at capitalism, or what capitalism became. I mean, it's going to be that anyway. But, this ability for centralized parties to really control things and take advantage of people. And you look at it now with the ETFs and all this sorts of other thing, and it still has all the same properties that it began with. It still works, whether it's 10 cents or $10 million per Bitcoin. but it's definitely been subsumed into the regular financial system in a big way. And I think that's something that a lot of people involved in crypto, who champion this whole financial freedom stuff, don't really take seriously enough, that any and all attempts to sort of break out of that system end up getting just swallowed within it through the speculation, essentially, because the price of Bitcoin, for the most part, is just monetary premium. It's speculation. There's no reason for it to cost any more than, a cent, really. It still functions.
Yeah, it still does exactly what it does. If it's $10 Bitcoin, you can send it, you can hold it, you can keep it, you can use it as a medium of exchange.
Yeah, something that I found interesting as well is that thinking along the lines of capitalism, and to be clear, I'm no communist here when it comes to this sort of thing. It's more of a diagnosis, if you will, or a critique. It's more just an interest in that way. Obviously, it has a lot of problems. I don't think it's a very good way of doing things, but it isn't something that's sort of out there treating us all badly. It's just a way of talking about systematic difficulties we have with our financial system and exploitation, especially. But when we think about our blockchain, much like capitalism itself, it has to reproduce. And Bitcoin's every 10 minutes, there's a new block. And within its design is this ability to reproduce the whole history of Bitcoin repeatedly. Yeah, so it's this validation nodes and whatnot. And I find that very interesting because when you think about it, it requires people to reproduce. Yeah. And so, I mean, obviously it's computer power, but someone has to sort of run it, load it up. There's no way a computer's going to do it by itself. As much as you love, artificial intelligence, that's way down the line for anything like that to happen. But
I don't like
so
AI
when
that
you,
much. I'm not
I don't mind. I have no fundamental problem with AI. It's just super overblown, really. Data sets are going to start predicting the future. I mean, Netflix can't even identify what movie I want to watch next. Spotify can't give me good songs.
Spotify DJ is okay, but I don't think we're at
or sometimes he gets it so wrong, and especially the gym, it's infuriating. It's like, dude, I don't want to listen to this right now, middle of a set or something. But it's this Bitcoin thing and this identity in crypto, and it's difficult right now, I think is paralleled just with a tech in general, and I guess the digitization of everything, where it all requires human beings to maintain it. And I immediately think of the Matrix, and I know it's really cliche to think that, but the farming, of people. So we're getting to a point now where the use case of so much is just completely non-existent in crypto, where the users are the ones being farmed, essentially, because you need people to keep this blockchain going. It requires energy of everyone, in a form of computing power mostly, and a few button clickings and this sort of thing. But it's constantly reproducing itself in this way, and it requires human power to do so. So I find that interesting just on a philosophical level. But in terms of its internal problem, it really is how much this has become hyper gambling, really. It really, so much of it has become, you look at things that have some sort of utility or are sometimes advancement on the basic ideas of cryptocurrency, even that with the, deals, VC deals, dumping, like all of it, just this financialization part of it really fucks a lot of it up, to be honest with you. And it's led to this thing, especially after the last cycle and everything going absolute mayhem, that most people involved are just interested in that. And that's why they're here. And so the identity is being changed. And a lot of old heads, especially a lot of Ethereum fans, are really not happy with all of that. And then all the Solana people love it, think it's the greatest thing on earth. So you sort of caught between all these sorts of things. So the biggest problem for me is, or the thing I find frustrating at least, is I see very little, maybe philosophizing is a way to put it. Like, what are we doing here? There's a bit of a throwback recently with the cypherpunk posting and talking about that sort of thing. Julian Assange getting out, which is fucking incredible, long overdue. There's a bit more of that, we want to take down the establishment and sort of work against it at least. But for the most part, what we're seeing is it's running with it as fast as it can. It's speed running the whole thing, really.
Well, the self-interest, I would say, is, and I don't mean this like in a negative slant at all, but like, the financial self-interest of all the actors involved has overtaken the ethos underlying it. And again, I'm a late entrant to crypto. I was not here for the early days. I wasn't here for the cypherpunk time. If anything, I probably got involved because of financial self-interest, where I was like, whoa, this actually looks like a soft market where you could make considerable amounts of money just by kind of hanging around and getting to know it. And there's better returns here than equities. But at the same time, I do think that I started off I was very, very skeptical particularly of Bitcoin, from the get-go. And it's only because I was introduced to it by the laser-eyed maxis. And it was that like message of like, yeah, it'll be the global reserve currency and everyone who doesn't own it, like have fun staying poor. And I was like, man, fuck these guys. Like whatever they're involved in, I don't want to go anywhere near. So I kept it at a distance for quite a while. But then I did end up coming across a bunch of stuff that was looking at non-state controlled money, that was looking at actually having digital property rights on the internet, that was payment rails that exist outside of governments. And I thought, hey, fuck it, that's actually not the worst of ideas. But I do think that comes back to now, the big issue is, what the fuck is it solving? And you see the suit-wearing kind of corporate types being like, stable coins, the killer app is the thing that they love sticking in headlines and all that stuff. I'm implicit in that as a journalist as well. But there's these like obscure kind of boring use cases where it's very much like it's financial plumbing. It's not sexy. You can't speculate on it. It's stable coins where you can send fucking remittances. Like you can't, unless you're the third party in that, or you're the app you like that have created those rails and taking that commission. That's where you make the money. But there's no money to be had in, a retail participant owning a lot of USDC, unless they're doing something, that they're lending it or they're using it in DeFi or I don't know. It's just not, it's that kind of thing where it's like, I feel like a lot of the crypto applications, minus the speculation, are just these kind of boring things where it's like, even to use Ethereum to mint an NFT, it's like, it doesn't really matter if the price of ETH, I'm sure an ETH head will absolutely cook me for this, but it's like, sure, there's gas involved, but if you want to mint something on a blockchain, who cares like how much it costs to do so? It's just, it's there, it's inalienable, all that kind of stuff. What are we doing?
There's been some interesting stuff in Lynn Adlin's book. Alden, I forgot her name. Broken
Alden,
Money.
I think, yeah.
Alden, yeah. Great book. Really lays out the sort of the ledger thesis, I'll call it, in terms of use case and as new money. And she has some wonderful examples of how it gets used. Third world countries especially. I think Afghanistan's the big one she focuses on, with people, women particularly, trying to escape with money. And they just get every border crossing, smugglers, everything. They just take everything off them all the way out. They might lose it on a boat too, where if you've got like a 12-word seed phrase that you can even memorize, or just on a bit of paper, you can get out with your cash, with your money, with your value, essentially. Another way of sort of getting around corrupt governments and that sort of thing, but then you lead into sort of, difficult areas around sort of, if you just don't like the government, which most people in crypto seem to not, even though I'm not sure they really understand what a government is, but they're against it. They are against. Yeah. So you can, like, we saw the trucker convoy in Canada, when they froze all their bank accounts, they went to Bitcoin to essentially do it, which is, whatever you think about the truckers and the COVID and all that sort of stuff, that's a pretty legitimate way to show a use case of it. So I see that, but I think you're right in terms of this banality, this boring nature. Like, I keep thinking back to years and years ago when I was at university. I was working in logistics for a basketball company here in Australia. So obviously not very popular, but the software on the computers was so ancient. I'm talking like 80s. But I realized it was ubiquitous across logistics companies. They all use it because it just worked. It made sense to them. You couldn't change it, upgrade it, and this sort of thing. But you see these sort of these rails within massive corporations and companies. So the banks have it themselves, really old systems that work and that sort of stuff. If you go to like even medical, if you're trying to like input patient data and notes, it's an absolute joke how bad the UI UX is, but then the underlying system is very robust in terms of its strength, but it's not very interesting or creative. And for me, I think that's where Ethereum ends up in some sense. It just becomes this base layer of a lot of financial things, but it's not interesting at all. And most people aren't even going to know they're using it. I think at the end of the day, if you look at the development of mobile phones, even Apple won out massively, at least for a big period, just because it looked better and felt better. It was nothing to do with use. I mean, it was simple, so that's definitely a positive for the use. But otherwise, it was really just because it was cooler in the end.
Yeah, the idea of having like all of this like really, really deep functionality, it's just like, well, I think Steve Jobs understood that very well. Of like, well, no, people are going to use things that are aesthetic, that are clean, that have that like kind of almost technological beauty, if you will, and I think that, I have a very cursory understanding of the history of tech, but yeah, focusing in too heavily on these like extremely niche things of like, oh, well, it can run these, very complex programs that 7 people give a shit about. It's like, well, fantastic. That's great. But yeah, clean UI is kind of the ultimate victor. But what we were talking about before does all come back to that issue of like, what does crypto do at the moment?
Yeah, like it really started with, what's the guy's name? David Charm in the 80s. And it was about developing systems where you didn't need to trust the other people running the system, essentially.
Yep.
So it was this idea of, I don't need to trust the other person. This whole thing is going to work. This is proof of work, eventually, what it got developed into. But if you don't trust someone else on the network, can you guys still work together to maintain it without needing that trust? And that's the decentralization of trust, essentially. That's where you get hashing from, and that's where you get private keys. It took a while for them to work it all out until you got sort of Bitcoin that worked. And there was a couple of other ones that they tried to use, eCash and BitGold, I think was one, or eGold, something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is the use case originally was, I don't trust you, but we need to have an environment where that doesn't matter.
I think when it comes to money, that's a very good idea. Like in terms of dealing with money at scale, it's a good idea. And I think it lends itself very well to the libertarian impulse. I wouldn't even say it lends itself well. I think that the libertarian impulse lends itself well to that system. And that's what attracts libertarians to it, because it's like, I'm not a destroy all banks kind of guy. I think that societies run on trust. And I think it's a good thing. You want to have that, you want to have high trust societies. Like if you want to have social programs and well-flowing systems, you need high levels of social trust at scale, which is difficult to achieve, but it's doable. We've done it domestically over time. It's yet to be seen whether or not we can do it as a globalized world. I would say that experiment is not going super well at the moment. I don't mean that in like an anti-immigration way. I just mean it in like it's interesting to see how cultural values mix and to see how that trust kind of dissipates in countries where you do have lots of crisscrossing values, particularly amplified by social media. But I think in a financial sense, the desire to have a lack of trust when it comes to like, okay, I want there to be a set amount of money and I want to be able to send it to places and I don't want to have to worry about someone fucking me over in the interim. I think that's a very desirable kind of like technological outcome for money.
I think ultimately it's a bit of a band-aid. Like there's an identification of a problem here is like, I don't trust the other people around here, which is an alarm bell should ring immediately. Yeah. We got to work out a better way of doing this if I don't trust anyone around me. I mean, there's a certain level of distrust that we probably have of everyone. Yeah. In terms of something bad happens to me, they're not going to help. They don't know who I am. They're not going to help me. But a certain level, if you're living in a civilized society, you want to have some level of trust. And this is where this whole, cult of financial freedom comes in. This fantasy of a life free of antagonism. Especially young people right now, very cynical for good reason. But everything's just collapsed, especially in crypto. It's become this cult of, if I can just make enough money, then I won't have issues and I'll be able to navigate the world as I wish, because they see billionaires doing whatever they seem to be doing and breaking all the rules and getting away with it. But that's not a solution to you just become one of them. That's not going to fix anything. Nor are the chances that you're going to actually do that. Like, let's be honest, no one is going to make it to there.
Yep.
It's a big changing that I guess we're seeing, or at least this is how I read it anyway, over the last sort of 20 to 30 years. The internet's come along and it's just, everything's changed. Like everything's really, and it's accelerating and all that sort of stuff. But if you think talking, financial life, there's no longer a clear path for career and employment, because people have multiple jobs throughout their lives, like in careers. I think it's like 4 or 5 now is the average of like just swapping. And like, I don't like this, I'm doing something else. That could be a number of things. I mean, we had the 90s where everything was so amazing for like 10 years. And they just told everyone, you can do whatever you want. Literally can do whatever you want. It's prosperous. And we all tried, and that didn't work at all. So I think it's a difficulty in that sort of thing, and we see what comes in as well in terms of the digital world. I think it's had a big influence on identity, and I don't want to talk identity politics because how fucking boring is that? But
it's just the same
in terms of it,
thing,
the value of having identity and grounding yourself in something. People have navigated towards that or gravitated towards that as a way of sort of solidifying, okay, this is This will make everything make sense, and life will be okay, however you want to put it. But then you need multiple identities. Yeah, you need, your online, your offline. You need in this space I am this, in this space I am that, and so it becomes this really difficult thing to manage. And what people are ignoring, I find, in a lot of this sort of stuff is the fact that it doesn't work. That's okay, because the gap, the fact that we aren't able to sort of ground our own being. People find it, we all find it very difficult to identify who we are, what we're good at. It's much, much easier for other people to look at us and be like, you're this. And you're like, wow, I didn't realize that sort of thing. But we get away from this because it's terrifying to not know. Yeah. It's a really difficult thing. And so instead of identifying that we all have this gap, and that's the way, in fact, the way that we will be able to connect and get to where we want to go with things and change and that sort of stuff, the opposite happens, where it becomes territorial. And this is what I am, and this is what you are. And like this cynicism you see, especially online, and it's sort of, I'm quoting someone who I've totally forgotten now, but it's like, pessimists expect the worst, which is, I guess I put myself in that bracket, especially if you look at my online posting. Cynics need the worst. They need it. Their whole identity and life is based on things not going well. And this is where I guess I see a lot of the solution to that. This life free of antagonism is this, financial freedom, which a load of shit, absolute load of shit. Because anyone you've seen make it, all right, we can go through them. I can't think of anyone who I've seen through the crypto thing who's made it and then life's been better. Yeah. So many went to jail. Kobe.
A lot of them went to jail.
A lot of them went to jail. Kobe, one of the most likable dudes around, very early to everything. He's still around. He hasn't been able to cleave himself from this and just go live life. He's building stuff. I mean, testament to him that he obviously enjoys a lot of this, and he did study computer science, I believe, so it is his area and that sort of thing. But you listen to him on the podcast that stopped a while ago, but it'll probably start up again in the next 3 to 6 months, I assume. Hopefully, fingers crossed for everyone involved. He still bemoans a lot of life. He's not happy-go-lucky, everything's great. Yeah. So for me, it's not a solution. And I think people who believe that and really peddle that are doing themselves and everyone around them a disservice. Like, what's that guy? I think we're discussing this before. The degen gambler guy who's just burying himself in mountains and mountains of debt. And everyone's encouraging him.
Tarded gambler or something like that is his at on Twitter. And it's like, oh, fuck, just took out more loans, maxed out a new credit card.
Oh, my
and
God.
Like, don't worry, man. It is a weird balance because it's like, it's almost that, like, it's such a cliche to say, but it's like, if you've got fucking, like, money will only solve so many problems. And I feel like the internet has really entrenched this idea of like that meme of like, well, I'd much rather be crying in a mansion kind of thing, where it's like, well, it's not necessarily about avoiding sadness. It's not necessarily about just, this idea that money will set you free to a certain extent. Like, I don't think that's like an incorrect thing to say. Like, if you have more money, you will have less financial stress. Yes. And that's good. And I feel like that's a huge issue for a lot of people, or at least a perceived issue for a lot of people right now. It's a very, very felt sense of financial inequality. It's like Kyla Scanlon's idea of a vibe session. This idea that, like, things are actually, they're okay. Like, again, when you actually look at it in the terms of housing affordability and like some of those real basic things, you can go, okay, that's fucked. But in terms of like relative wages for a lot of people, and again, it depends on which metric you use, but her outlook on that was like, it's a very, very deeply felt sense of inequality. And I think that comes back to what we talked about before of like, you have that rent-seeking nature of quote unquote crony capitalism, where it's like you have people in the upper echelons making ungodly sums of money that don't seem to be beholden to any of the rules. And then a lot of these people with a lot of upward social mobility posting about it on social media as well. So you have this kind of confluence of factors feeding into the minds of young people, just being like, oh man, like, you can't be happy with a full-time job that pays okay, and having like, an okay little place. It's kind of like this intense fear of the globalist world order is out to get you and you're going to eat the bugs. You'll own nothing and be happy. And I think that's a reasonable fear to have. But again, crypto's been kind of subsumed by that fear. And it's now fallen into this category of like, fuck yeah, this is my chance to go to the casino and make it out, and I'll be done. And crypto now almost serves that function of like, I can go here and I can solve everything by just one soul and a dream. And I mean, I even partially fall into that camp from time to time. Like, I'm very much I'm as much a degenerate, probably more of a degenerate than most. I think it's quite entertaining and I do it all the time. And I think like, holy shit, if you're not stupid, and again, it's not that if you're not stupid, but it's also if you know when to kind of be protective with your capital and when you know just not to throw it down the drain, I guess. But it's never been this thing of like, for me anyway, and I think it's good that I'm a little bit older. Maybe if I was younger, this would be a problem, but I've never approached it from like, oh my God, if I just, just hit big, my problems are fucking solved. I'm like, no, I like my work. Like I have a plan for my life. It's not just this thing of like, fuck yeah, I can go to the casino, I can win it all. And then I'm going to go live on an island somewhere and just kind of drink martinis in the sun. Until I die, which I think for a lot of people is, I'm not trying to moralize. I just think that's a lot of the template here.
And it makes sense. I mean, there's a general distrust of, society, structures, government especially. Look who, like the US election and the debate, that's a complete joke.
That made me think like, oh, fuck. Like, what do you do? You have the orange man and you have the senile man.
You got a rapist and a dead guy. Like, this is a bad video game. Yeah, it's just turn off and on again. This is not good.
And that's the best. That's the best and brightest America has to offer to us in 2024. It's like, it's supposed to be the age of abundance. It's supposed to be, and I think that's, again, I'm kind of going on a rant here, but I feel like there's that disjunction between the future that was promised and the future that is here. And it's that thing of like, oh, tech's going to make so much stuff better and there'll be all these new things and everyone will have more free time and, AI and tech and all these new things will make our lives easier. And yet it almost feels as though the exact inverse has happened.
The financialization of discontent is definitely in play. Yeah. It's, the idea that you can patch over all these very human difficulties with tech and it doesn't, in the end, nothing changes really. But it is something to sort of pay attention to. It's really how I saw the longer term, maybe not use case, but staying power with cryptocurrency or digital currencies, if you want to call it that, is being a sci-fi fan. You look at any of those sci-fi movies and you look at the currencies used in them and the powers used and that sort of stuff. You could imagine from where we are now, things just even accelerate, just going along as they do, and it becoming some version of that. I think it's in The Fifth Element, that old 90s one, where he runs out of credits for his food, he has to pay for his food in credits, which is not far from a token. A credit and a token are the same thing. And it's like I think it's a social credit system or something like that. But I mean, it's not far off what they can manage to do these days with a lot of things. And I mean,
Food Coin brought to you by China. There we go.
I've got no problem eating bugs in the end. I get the euphemism, but if it came down to it, I'll rather eat bugs than starve.
Yes, seconded. But yeah, it is quite interesting if you think about it in the context of like, okay, let's just continue on the theme of technologization of a lot of problems. Then yeah, crypto seems to have a very deep product market fit. And again, I keep coming back to, there's that degen Spartan tweet that was like, explain crypto to a normie friend in like one sentence, and it was essentially like 24 words and you've got an off-world bank account. And I thought that's a very like, it's a sci-fi-esque kind of way of putting it. Like, sweet, here you go, there's your fucking money, you don't have to worry about it. I mean, assuming no depeg of the of the stable coin if you choose to hold it in that. But I don't know, man, what's your take on, there doesn't seem to be a slowdown on this idea that technology can solve our problems, even in the face of the fact that it's simply not. And again, I get myself in a bit of a hole here because I'm a big fan of Jonathan Haidt and Greg Lukianoff. I really, really like those guys. I think they have a lot to talk about with social media. It's now a trope to kind of discuss the whole thing of like, oh yeah, like social media bad. It's like, fuck off, dude. We all know. But at the same time, I think that it is something that if you take it seriously, it's like, well, no. It's actually, it's quite bad. It's ruining politics. It's ruining mental health. And now social media is crossing into, hyper financialization. Like you end up with the Mr. Beastification of content. Everything's just like a, keep your eyes on screens for as long as possible from everywhere. And I was chatting about it with my girlfriend this afternoon about like, even the user experience of YouTube, now that they've introduced shorts and all these other things, I used to go to YouTube and be like, oh, sweet, cool. I'm going to go down a bit of a rabbit hole of something I'm interested in. But now I just constantly feel my attention being pulled to the shittier edges. And it's these things where I'm like, why do you have to change it so much? Like it was good before, and now I feel like it's another thing that I'm almost keeping at arm's length because I'm like, oh, I don't like how I feel when I do these things. So that was a very long-winded way of kind of getting your take on how do you kind of fix this kind of unstoppable train of technology and digital financialization in the
I'm not
current
sure
state?
if we do. I'm not sure if we do. We do. I think we're passengers to some degree. I mean, some level of resistance is probably healthy to just augment where it goes. Yeah. So it isn't so terrible. I think part of that is just the fact that, like, what Gen Z is Gen Z the first one who grew up with screens? So like, it really is some sort of weird experiment.
Yeah.
Be close. Yeah, because I didn't get a computer until I was 13 or something. Showing my age, really.
I didn't get a phone until I was 14, 15.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good thing. And when I did, it was an iPhone 3. It was like...
I had a brick. I had a Nokia you could throw down a well and it'd still be fine 2 years later.
I had the Samsung flip phone first. So
wow.
With the little buttons.
Very advanced.
1, 2, 3, 4, all that jazz. Yeah.
The issue is that technology, science, if we can just generalize that, works very well with capitalism. Amazing relationship where you just always developing the new thing. You can sell the new thing. Just constantly sell the new thing, whatever it happens to be. That's all your YouTube is nowadays. Because like you said, not original, but like back in the day, it was an interesting rabbit hole to go down sometimes. You would find the weirdest, wackiest, coolest stuff about niche topics that you're interested in. And now you just get, I mean, if you look at anything that's considered masculine, you're just going to get women thrown at you immediately.
And Andrew Tate, and you're like, fuck. Okay.
Andrew Tate, Jordan Peterson, Joe Rogan, who else? Like the fucking 7 horsemen of idiocy. There's a fucking many of them. Yeah. So I think the difficulty is that link between the capitalist sort of consumption and reproduction, that sort of thing, and how much science can just do that. And you've seen it with like universities. Yeah, they're just money making machines now. So there's this sort of, they used to be places where they would challenge the status quo, but that's becoming very, very difficult because someone's going to pay your funding, and they don't want you to say that stuff. And so you don't say it anymore. Yep. You have to go like independent universities to even have a really good opinion on things a lot. I've seen a lot of people get fired recently over all sorts of political issues and just disagreeing with what the university's doing, which, I mean, a university should be a place where you get to do that, and it's fine. You don't have to get along and sort of be friends. But more to my point, it is that sort of relationship, I think, between science and tech's the biggest driver of that at the moment, and has been for a while now. And in its ability to create, I mean, Elon and Tesla, perfect example. Like the Tesla car is pretty amazing that he made it, but he's riding off that one thing. And I mean, of the SpaceX is another thing, but it's slowed down so much. He's unable to produce half the stuff. The truck looks like a giant metal cockroach, and it's not doing anything else can do. No one really likes the damn thing. It's ugly as hell. You know what I mean? Like it's sort of
a giant metal cockroach. Yeah, that's fucking fantastic.
It's awful.
The Cybertruck is.
Yeah.
I'm split on it. Yeah.
I'm not sure it's necessary for anything really. And I have someone, a family member who's quite close, who works for a major car company, who was one of the first ones to do the diesel and then the electric as well. And they're not going to go forward with a lot of it because they've realized that to make an electric car costs so much to do, resources and everything. It's not a really a great, even for a business, it's not a great business model. And they'll probably reduce them to like more the scooters and like individual sort of vehicles will be more of what they do in that sense. Okay. But yeah, the tech thing's an issue, I think, and because it just works so well with selling stuff and selling new, like the new iPhone and that sort of stuff. I mean, we can get really, psychoanalytic about it, and you can point out the fact that what you enjoy about your iPhone is actually the box. It's not even the iPhone, because everyone's got those boxes in their cupboard. You think you like the phone, but really you like that, opening it and that beautiful box, that white thing that fits really well. You put that in the cupboard because you might need it one day, and then you go through phones and you look in your cupboard and you've got 20 boxes. The box is actually an enjoyable thing. The phone itself becomes boring in about 2 days, loses its shine, especially now when they're just upgrades of the same thing.
It's the same shit.
Yeah.
Steve Jobs would be rolling in his fucking grave if he could see. Maybe
I don't know. I think with a lot of what's happened at the same time. Imagine the crazy stuff he'd be trying to do. He got it right once, really, like just absolutely nailed it, and didn't have to do anything else, really. And most people, live long enough to just completely undo what they've done, the good they've done, by making a bad mistake or just getting into something that really is not cool, dude.
Kind of like a band kind of finishing up after their greatest album, being like, all right, cool, we're not doing any more. We know what we've done. Thank you.
Very few do it, don't they?
We won't get any more experimental from here.
They get more awful and more awful. Yeah.
I would like to, and this is something, because we've mentioned it a couple of times, but I don't think we really dug into it. What's your take on the whole capitalism thing? Because I feel like it's a term that gets absolutely yoinked around on the internet, and it's this kind of, it's a demon to some people, and it's the evil virus of Satan that subsumes all. And then for others, it's the beautiful raw free market where all the innovation happens and everything's fucking great. And then there is no inherent good or bad. It's just a system, and it's how we use it, which I disagree with. But I don't get your take on
I don't buy that either. Yeah,
on how you think about it as a system.
I think people were making pretty amazing stuff, inventing wheels and things before capitalism was really around. I'm pretty sure so we don't need it to invent stuff. There is no this. So capitalism itself really is just talking about a system, an economic system, I think, and how it works necessarily. It's not, like I said before, it's not some external boogeyman. We can sort of be like, that's bad and we shouldn't have done that. It's just part of how things work for us. There is this idea that, it's just our natural way of doing things. Yeah, this very vitalist approach. It's about competition. That's how we evolved to this point, which I don't buy at all. Yeah. Because the best things don't win.
Feudalism for like 800 years.
And like the best things don't win. Half it's bad stuff made in some third world country that falls apart and doesn't work most of the time. And also, that's not how, as people, we developed. We didn't go through this whole thing where it was just the strongest survive. No, we needed the other people who weren't as strong to do farming, for example, and other things. Yeah, at some point we had to stop killing each other in mass amounts to actually survive. So there's a lot more, different structures there. But capitalism itself, it was an attempt to sort of order the economy based on these things, and it's mainly exploitive. It's what we have, so we don't know what else to do, but it works on exploitation. So this whole, Marx really identified this, quite genius too. I mean, everyone laughs at Marxists because you just meet them at college or university and they just yell in your face about something and you're just like, can you please leave me alone? And it's the reason why I didn't even pay attention to it for years, because I was just like, I don't like this. Can you please go away? But he really identified the difference between how much it costs to get someone to make something and how much you can sell it for. And we think nothing of it now because the capitalist gets to sell the thing you made for lots of money and you get paid for your wages. That's what you're worth. But it's like, where's the difference? Where is this sort of surplus value come from? It's being sold. You're essentially selling, this gap for a profit that the labourer does not see. So that's the base of that, how that sort of started. And I see that. I tend to agree with that. It's always been a frustration when I have work for companies and, just even in offices and this sort of thing. It's sort of, I don't get direct access to my work and what it does. Even if you think about how the fact you don't even get congratulated on doing something good nowadays. It goes up to the, trickle down does not work. We have seen this not work. So
no, I would push back on that a little bit, and I'd say, well, okay, but what about it's that premium on the effort to organize people into a structure that wouldn't have existed beforehand. And again, like I read a lot of Marx when I first came into uni. So I was a philosophy undergrad, so I spent a lot of time doing it, and I've come around. I've done almost like a full. It's not quite a 360. It's getting closer to a 720, where I've gone in and out of these phases of being like, Marx is right about this, and then maybe not, and then actually, and then maybe not. And so I'm constantly on this almost like Marx roller coaster where I'm like, I find myself kind of coming back and forth. I think that there's some very, very, very strong ideas from Marx, particularly to do with alienation of labor, which is what you mentioned before about like people in production line style economies. And increasingly, again, this comes back to this digitized idea of like people are constantly removed from the output of their labor. Like if I was a cobbler and I made fucking shoes, it's very easy for me to feel a sense of meaning. I make shoes for people. They wear them. I'm known as the guy that makes the shoes in town. But if I'm a guy that works at a factory and my job is to, stitch the sole onto one shoe that then goes out into a box of 100,000 that are then shipped around the world, and I get my weekly wage. It doesn't even matter if it's good. I'm like, well, who the fuck cares? I'm a guy on a production line. What's going on here? But yeah, anyway, that was my one kind of like pushback there.
No, you got a point. I don't agree. I don't think it takes much to organise people in that way. Really, if you meet people who are at that higher middle management or management level, they really aren't very good at their jobs most of the time. I have nothing good to say about any of them.
There's a lot of placeholders.
There's a lot of placeholders that don't need to exist. But the problem with Marx was his idea of what comes next, which is the problem with most left politics and critique, is like this utopian vision of if we all just work together, it's going to be great. It's like, fuck off, dude. We don't do that. Yeah, that ain't going to happen. And obviously it led to lots of bad stuff, you know.
Yeah.
Doing a communism and thing.
It's absolutely. I've been going through a bit of Fukuyama recently, and this is in Origins of Political Order, which I think is a great little world history book. And it was looking at this idea of how political order emerged essentially from very, very small groups of humans walking around throwing sticks at animals to entire nation states, where it was like, how do you get a band, what he calls bands, because he thinks tribes are bigger groups of people, and the original state of the human was a band. So it's like a kin group with just enough unrelated kin that you can essentially propagate, and that's pretty much it. And so he's like, how do we get from bands to Denmark, basically, where you have socialist policies, where you have an entire state. It's well organized, where there's very low tension and there's a high level of trust. But all that to say that he had a problem with Marx's analysis and that kind of endpoint of like Marx imagined a utopia that never existed. And that was the big issue. It's like, oh, we'll get back to this base level where everyone shares resources and there's no kind of like hierarchy. We'll get back to this like hunter-gatherer epoch of everything's chill, but just at scale. We'll just do that with like, 100 million people. And it's like, not only does the scale things complicate it, but it's also this idea of just shared resources in a group like that didn't really exist. Because even back then, you had kin groups that were fighting over land, that had certain spirits that were on these blocks of land, and like, fuck off, that's my land, or that's my ancestors' land. You can't touch it. So it's like, even when there were 20 people, it's been a shit fight.
Yeah, I see this a lot too, like this sort of, I guess it's historicizing things, which I tend to sort of steer clear of. I much prefer just sort of imminent critique, or just a critique at all, or a diagnosis of what's happening now rather than why it's happening the way it is because of what happened beforehand, because you don't fucking know. Like, we can't really tell. We get some idea.
Did not guarantee future results.
Not at all. And so, like, I work in mental health field, and everyone's always trying to find some sort of thing that used to be, and if we can get back to that, everyone will feel good. And it's like, it's not. It's bullshit. They're just selling you something, essentially. Yep. And along those lines of sort of more diagnosis or critique, I guess we can see that in crypto itself. If we think of us as subjects, which is another way of just saying we're subjected to something. And along the lines that we're talking, we're subjected to capitalism. Capitalism forms some, what we'd call an other, that we're all living in reference to. Yeah. So if you think about, I'm going to get a job, what job should I get? There's always a someone, not an identifiable person, but some sort of reference third point that you're thinking, if I do this, I'm going to earn more money, then I can get to this point, and I'm going to keep moving, and they would think well of me. This is a good financial decision, yeah? And that's based on no one in particular usually. It's not like anyone you know. It's usually some idea of some collective, this is the best way to behave financially at least. So we're subjected to that. And it does rely on some level of, well, as subjects, we are alienated. We go through separation, and the ugly word that everyone freaks out about is castration. Castration is this word that people hate to hear it. They hate Freud for it. Yeah. All castration means is when you get that job and you're happy you got that job and you thought it was going to be everything, but you realize it's just a name and life is still, that's castration. There's nowhere to stand where it's all full and makes sense. So we're always castrated. But financial freedom, uncastrated. Yeah. This is the idea.
There we go. Yeah.
This is what Orange Man, Trumpy represents. His fans, they think he is literally Jesus. He has no problem. So he can do whatever he wants. They're not going to waver on that level with things. But in terms of, if we're talking like cryptocurrency, it was working within that in terms of what maybe it didn't like with the other, this privacy, it wanted to see more of it, and along those lines. But my thinking of what it's come to, it's become, with this hyper financialization, is essentially gambling, really, most of it now. It's become perverted in a sense. And so this is like, we'll have different ways of relating to this other in our worlds. Neurotic's pretty standard one. Most of us are neurotic. They're psychotic. where you just don't believe the other, essentially, when it happens. And so it returns to you from outside and becomes voices and all this sorts of stuff. But perversion, is a very unique one. It's alienated, but it's disavowed castration. It's like refuses to accept that I have to be castrated, this sort of stuff. So it sort of short circuits in a way. And it has a core belief that the law and sort of social norms are fraudulent at worst and are weak at best, not to be trusted. And you see this so much in crypto. This is the line of like, society's a fucking joke. It's all bullshit. The financial system's run by, criminals. It doesn't work, da, da, da. And a lot of it is to a certain extent true. But the fact is we're all okay. We have lights on, most of us. We're eating. We're fine. So some part of it is working.
Andrew Tate is the poster boy for that perversion, I feel. Because it's that idea of like, the Matrix, man, it's all fucked. Like, the system's broken. And the only way to make it out is to have 4 Bugattis. And you're like, fuck me. That's the answer that you came up with to this problem. Fantastic. Great.
Yeah. And get stuck in Romania.
For human trafficking allegations.
If he really had found the answer, he would not have to keep recording videos to tell you he has the answer. He's selling you shit. That's all that is. That's all he's doing. Yeah.
You wouldn't have a university that you direct thousands of people into for a monthly premium. That's sure as fuck not it.
Yeah. But it is representative in that way as well. And what happens? The pervert shortcuts. So when I think of perversion, that sort of stuff, as like fetishes and all that sort of stuff. But I saw a video years ago of a late night bus. I think it was in London or somewhere, and some guy had a woman's boot, and he was just making out with it, having the greatest time. He'd got this boot, and that's a very good example of shortcutting. There's no need for an other. I don't have to have someone else. I have just this object that I can enjoy fully. Yeah, where most of us are dealing with the fact that you can't fully enjoy anything. No matter how many different things you buy or you get to, or degrees you get, or different partners you have, it's never quite it. But the pervert thinks they've got it, essentially. They've got there. And what they do is they follow some underlying imperative of the other to a T. Like they don't accept castration, or they can't have it. They're like, I will have it. And so in terms of capitalism, to pervert that is really what you see, where it's just accumulate surplus value. Like memes are the best example of it. There's nothing inherently not valuable or just of any substance at all. It is just one little joke, and that's it. And so it's, instead of sort of like make like the capitalist sort of imperative, like make a product, sell the product, make some money, exploit some people along the way, sell to a bigger company and they'll ruin it, that sort of thing. It's like, don't do any of that. The pervert's like, let's just go straight to just make money for the sake of money out of thin air, out of nothing. And I think that's what we're seeing more and more of within crypto. At least, I don't know, I've noticed since the last cycle, things got idiotic there. Yeah, there's lots of novelty and JPEGs were going for millions of dollars and all this sort of stuff. But really you're seeing like pump.fun. I don't know how it works, but it seems to me that everyone's just spinning up something new every 5-10 minutes that's based on nothing, some in-joke, some internet artifact. It goes up, goes down, and explodes, and this sort of thing. And this is really, you add in the whole like being against the regular financial system, TradFi, these idiots. I know what's going on. This enjoyment of being against and just essentially gambling is a very perverse way to approach a certain problem of financial existence. And I think this is part of the identity problem that everyone's got, because that's what everyone sees most of the time. All over social media, all you see is people who have made all this money on junk, essentially, and very little of how this might actually be good for anyone. It's just the latest token name on pump.fun. Does it sound catchy? Can we get it up to like whatever market cap, and then it just eventually goes to zero and all that sort of stuff.
Yep. I'm implicit in this perversion deeply. No, but that is fascinating. I'd never actually conceptualized it as this idea of what. Yeah, I like the psychoanalytic framework here of like, okay, you have an end. How are we going to shortcut it? But it's not only that, but it's the relation. It's all of the little psychological dynamics in there that make it worthwhile, that make it desirable as a mode of wealth creation. Because it's like there's a lot of people that hear about meme coins. They have no desire, like, they have no fucking desire to go near it.
No.
And
they see it. They kind of see it for what it is. They're like, this is empty. Outside of the financial aspect, which if you're new to things, you don't really understand if you can even make that work. Some people are attracted to it and they jump straight in. Most people are like, this seems weird. Why would you spend so much time? And you're like, but I made so much money. And they're like, yeah, but what is this? What are you doing? And I think it's a lot to do with the gamification of things. Yeah. A lot of people in crypto who do well, at least, come from gaming.
Yep.
And that's a very, very amazing sort of backdrop and battleground for all of this, because you don't trust other people you play games with. You're just trying to win.
Yeah. A lot of the best crypto investors are poker players.
Mm.
Like a lot of the best kind of like lone wolf traders are former poker players. Mm-hmm. And that's to do with that mentality of like they have a systems-based approach to investment, scare quotes, which is very much like, protect capital, make certain take a certain amount of risk each time, remove risk at the right amount of times, go in on decent enough odds, and obviously those change from hand probabilities to thick liquidity on a shitcoin. But that is a fascinating dynamic.
Just interesting to think about just the number of people who are playing this game, if you want to call it that, where 10 years ago people were doing other things. Like it's hard to step out of this, I find, to sort of be like, what is actually going on? Because either you're too far removed and you don't understand how it works, or you get sucked into it and you're like, there's just so much going on all the time. This is so confusing. And like, what is this for? So I see a big divide. There's a philosopher, if anyone's interested, Catherine Malibu. She's French, so that last name is probably pronounced different. But she talks about digital currency and its importance. And there's a declaration some years ago about the need for an independent, like cryptocurrency, essentially. And yeah, she sees it as similar to what I'm saying in terms of it's a problem internal to capitalism. It's like a rift internal. She sees it more along the lines of anarcho-capitalism, which are more of a philosophy side of things about how people are just turning into pirates, essentially. That's what I think of.
Yeah. No, fascinating. I like over philosophizing things. It's one of my little talents.
Yeah.
I'm getting some of the authors of Resistance Money on here soon.
Awesome.
To talk about because they've outlined what I think. I've only read a couple chapters of it, the ones that I've managed to scrounge on the internet, but I've got my book coming from the world's greatest monopoly, Amazon, in a little bit. And so I'm keen to go through that, because from what I've seen, it's one of the better, more reasonable treaties I've seen on the reason of why it's important that this exists at all. That isn't just like Michael Saylor. It's a fucking cyber hornets. And it's all fun to get involved with the Michael Saylor memes. Be like, oh God, he's such a bullish guy on Bitcoin. But like, if you think about it from the outside, like that's probably what kept me out of crypto for a long time, was the kind of Saylor posting of like, it's a cybernetic hornet's nest of energy that grows stronger. I was like, what the fuck? It's a coin, man. What are we talking about? It's a token on the internet. Chill. So yeah, without doxing you too much, like you've done quite a bit of work in psychoanalytic theory. What else is there in crypto that you see? Because there's obviously the perversion aspect of just shortcutting, which I think is quite funny, because it's shortcutting shit that was already a wild speculative bubble. It's like, even the tech coins that we're not quite sure what the latest scalability layer L2 CDK rollup does. But hey, at least the token went up. But now it's like, nah, fuck that. That's too complicated. I want a pumped.fun coin that goes to 100 mil in the next 36 hours.
Yeah.
I want to ask you about your exploits with your funky DeFi tokens, because I know you don't fuck with meme coins, but I know you enjoy the more unknown little DeFi projects as well as your little penchant.
I messed around a lot at the end of. I came in at the day of the top last cycle, 2021. Yeah.
Hell yeah.
I had a friend make a bag on Dogecoin. He was one of the ones who just got it. He made a bag and bought himself a Tesla, which is pretty fun. And I was like, what the fuck is this, dude? So I got involved. What is this?
Me too. I bought some Dogecoin. I sold incredibly early because I was like, that's too much money to make. And it was like a few grand, but I had no idea what I was doing. And I was like, what?
I didn't really buy a lot of stuff, to be honest with you. I really didn't know what was happening. And the only thing I made money on was because I liked what someone was explaining things in a very a very unique way, in a very straightforward way. Shout out to Dre, actually. And I bought some of a token he made, and I sent him a message saying, hey, I don't expect to make any money off this. I'm just buying it because I like what you're doing, so I want to support you. I thought he got the money. I didn't even understand how it worked. So that was my level of understanding. Turns out it was an ohm fork that went poof and exploded. So I was like, oh, this is crazy. And the only reason I survived that was because I was so green that I was like, as soon as money started getting made, I was just selling constantly every day, just selling. So I did fine with it. Since then, most of the time it's me. I just play around with stuff. So like, Canto is a good example. I was, really, really early to that because I just was like, what is this thing? I want to play with it, essentially. And it's been mostly luck. Even DeFi, I missed that and how it worked, and like pre-mining things and all that sort of stuff happened. The only thing that I have small amount of some stuff, and I bought it last October, and I haven't touched it since.
Yep.
Sold a little bit this last dip because I saw it sort of coming a little bit and wanted to sort of grab some more of it. So yeah, market-wise, I don't do a lot. I sold almost everything last year. What I do sort of continue to hold, I guess my thinking along the lines of, it's probably pretty obvious from what I've been speaking about, is a lot of normal financial instruments are coming, because that's a big use case for all this. So you can probably guess the sector that I'm interested in. So it's a bit of that, but for the most part, I'm mostly out. I've done what I wanted to do with the money that I accidentally made a lot of the time. But I think it does go up. I think long enough time frame, 6 months at least, things are going to go up, really. You got an election coming. We've been suffering for a good 2 years now, cost of living crisis, yada yada yada, in most countries everywhere. It's not going to be a situation where they can pull economies back down to a sustainable level. This idea of sustainability too is a load of shit in every sector, even like the actual sustainability. Like, tangent here, but I get really irritated with it, how everything needs to be sustainable now. It's just a selling point because we aren't sustainable. We eat food, we shit out half of it. You know what I mean? We aren't running at efficiency here. The planet isn't running at efficiency. Why pretend that everything needs to be sustainable all the time? I'm tired of these straws. Just give me a normal straw. Anyway.
Fuck the turtles in the process.
Oh, no. I like the turtles, but we can make straws and just put them somewhere else. I don't know. I'm just sick of my straws dissolving. I buy a smoothie, I'm enjoying it. 5 minutes later, my straw's stuck in a cardboard, and I can't even have my drink. And I'm upset about it.
There's a way for you to participate in the capitalist venture. You need to start a sustainability straw that works.
No, but I think generally speaking, it's going to go up. Like everything's more digital, like just really basic thinking about it. There's no, you don't have to be a genius to understand that's probably the direction everything's going. So I think that's where we're heading. But for most people who might happen to listen to this, but most people involved in crypto are going to lose everything. And I'm not just saying that because everyone else says it.
And that's why this is called
you legitimately
NGMI.
are going to lose it all. Yeah, you are not going to make it in that sense anyway. You can make it in other sense, in actually enjoying your life and finding something for yourself. I'm not going to say happiness because what's that? But you can have something for yourself, but it ain't going to be this. It ain't going to be this. And the reason is loss. Yeah, this is the difficulty. Freud got very depressed halfway through his work because he would treat people and he would help them and all this sort of stuff. And a lot of them would revert back to day one as soon as they got towards the end of the treatment. And other people, people come back from the war and they're having nightmares about what happened in the war. He's like, why would our psychical system do this? This makes no sense. But what he found out was we love to repeat loss. And this is how you connect actually with people. You think of even in crypto itself, most people bond with other people about their losses, not their wins. The wins send people into the stratosphere. They spend all this money. They act like a fool. People don't like them. They get an ego, But the loss is where everyone actually connects and wants to work together and be friendly and these sorts of things.
I've seen that a lot on the timeline of, oh man, I missed the bear market. The vibes were better.
That's usually people who just aren't making any money in the bull market, so they're pissed off about it. But there is a lot of truth to it. No, I tend to agree. Yeah. And so if you think this is what comes out of this is the idea of repetition compulsion. We compulsively repeat the same loss over and over and over again. You can see it in someone who keeps getting the same partner. It goes badly. They think they learn from it. They end up with the same type of person, be it bad for them in some way or violent or something like this. People do this in life. Yeah, they do the same thing. Gamblers, very obvious. They're going to go gamble again, and so most people are going to do that. They're going to repeat this loss. Yeah, this is the death drive. They're going to do it in some way. They'll work out a way to do it and end up with nothing again. So take your wins and run as fast as you can.
I think that's sage fucking advice, especially with someone like, I don't know, you see the number of Phantom Wallet screenshots. And there is that deep culture on CT of just kind of being like, watch me run it up. Like, and people are like, holy shit, please. Yeah, like I think that there's a
great example.
Laugh at that and being like, haha, that's so funny. This guy doesn't give a fuck. But it's like, especially with memes, it's like, well, on a long enough time horizon for essentially every single one, it's not going to end well. And this comes back to what we're talking about with perversion of like the perversion here is that it's also extremely, again, I'm a participant. I'm not moralizing. I have far too much exposure to meme coins, but it is fundamentally player versus player. Like when you sell the top tick, where in your imagination, when you sell the top tick of some glorious meme coin candle and you run away with all of that money, there is someone on the other side buying that. There's a party on the downside that's like, okay, and I think that's another thing that we have to remember of
no free lunches.
No free lunches.
But that's a great example of what I'm talking about. That whole like I'm going to do a 1K to 1 million challenge. That's pretty extreme. But these sort of run it up things, where do they start? They apparently have money, but they pretend they lose it all to start again. They have to repeat this loss to go forward. And this is what I'm talking about. So there's no like grand secret to this. Just work out the ways in which you lose. How are you going to make yourself lose again? And try not to do that. Or just make the time horizon big enough that you can escape. But this is this whole like know thyself thing. You can't really know yourself. You can see some of the behaviors you might do, what you do like and what direction you go, but it's just like disparate pieces of yourself. But there are repetitive structures that you can find. And one of them is, how do I trip myself up repeatedly? How am I making my life harder for myself? And I think that's a very important thing for most people who are involved in this to learn, because you're going to play it out in front of everyone, or at least on chain, which is an interesting, it's all there, which is crazy to think, man. This is like one of the longest running financial experiments of all time, or human experiments, behavior experiments, because it's blockchain, it's all recorded. It's all there. The only other thing I can think of is the one baby thing in China. Like that went for a long time. Like that's a pretty crazy thing to see what happened to that sort of like people, populations and all this sorts of stuff. But in terms of human behavior and financialization and sort of privacy and all that sort of stuff, Bitcoin, the blockchain, the record of all of it is someone's at some point when we have the ability, probably AI actually, now I think about it, to sort of dig through that data. It's going to be some interesting insights and things to see in there.
Now that's the thing with like even at a extremely practical level, this idea of like tax avoidance. It's like, for now, you just wait until the tax officers have AI, because that on-chain data can then just be sifted through. And if you don't think that they're not going to be able to bubble map you to your wallet or wherever it was in at least, minimum 5 years, then you want to be coming up with an extremely sophisticated way to figure out your on-chain shit.
The first person who works out how to burn addresses, like wallets, is going to be very rich and may or may not die immediately afterwards. Someone will get them, some government will get them. But that's the ultimate end game of that sort of avoidance, is to sort of be able to burn an address and just delete it.
They'll get tornado cashed for sure. That's a that's a sanctionable protocol right there. Yeah, that's interesting. That comes back to like the data of financial behavior on blockchains in and of itself is a more meta use case of, here we plugged X 100 million monkeys into the machine and let them speculate on the price of money and do things with it.
And what do they do? What do they do?
What are they doing?
A whole load of junk for the most part.
Pump.fun.
It's the Pump.fun. Yeah, go to Solana. Hang out there for a while.
Oh, I have been. I've been on Solana a lot recently. It's funny. I'm saying it like I'm not one of these people, but I am.
No, but I think most people have some level of distance from it or unease about it. Like there is, I think most people inherently do have that sort of like, this is pretty amazing, but what's going on? Or should I be doing this? I wouldn't go as far as to say people feel dirty, but there's very few people I've truly met. I mean, you're one of them that haven't done something that is just, morally corrupt. People get that little, I can be the one who does exit with all the money. And I've seen them do it, all of them.
And that's
repeatedly,
the issue. Like that's what it comes down to. Of like you have a relatively anonymous system of speculation, of trustlessness, and then inherently you have this problem of trust comes back in the system where it's like, oh, of course, we're humans, we build relationships, and so it's like, sure, the ledger is trustless. You can't double spend the fucking currency, but I sure as shit can promise you something, not deliver on it.
I mean, who runs the ledger? People run the ledger. You can't get away from this difficulty. It's a fantasy in the end. Well, we'll try, but
that is quite funny that crypto is the solution to this, and yet it's probably the biggest circus of mistrust financially that's existed. It's quite I've forgotten the literary term, but it's there. I'll think of it in an hour's time and be like,
probably
fuck, that was it
over dinner or something.
Yeah, literally. So yeah, I don't know. This is just something I'm like, do you think it's a good idea for just normal people to invest in crypto? Like, as in, because I see a lot of more sound financial advice being like, oh, have a 5 to 10% portfolio allocation to Bitcoin and Ethereum to capture the upside if there is some.
Most people, I would say, don't do it. I would say if they're going to, just do your Bitcoin, Ethereum on some exchange, then self-custody. But even that, if you're talking to someone who doesn't know what they're doing, that is so difficult to do. It's not easy. So they're better off just playing around with like an exchange that has an app on their phone, doing a little bit and holding it, Ethereum, Bitcoin, Solana, maybe. Like, why get people involved in anything else? They're just going to probably fuck it up in some way and get hurt. Yeah. There's one guy, there's an old joker down at my local cafe who he bought the bottom of Bitcoin heavy. And I go down there now and he just sits there just with the biggest smile on his face, drinking his coffee. I haven't seen him go to work since. So he's like, he's running up. Okay. He's doing amazing. He's watching Bankless podcasts and stuff now. It's hilarious. I've wanted to say hello to him and be like, hey, man, how's it going? Like, well done. Like, good for you. Do you know what this is? And all that sort of stuff. But I'll just leave him be. But for most people, I would say an interest is good to get an idea of maybe what it is that all these people are talking about or hating on for no apparent reason. But it's still a bit precarious to really get too involved, I think. And two, it's still a bit too difficult. We're talking about the phone deal here, and the way Apple won was just be the easiest and the most comfortable and the sexiest, really, in the end. So whoever cracks that is going to get the most mind share, I think.
Yeah, that's a huge old thing where it's like, I think about all the things that I take for granted in terms of just things that I think are basic knowledge, but it's like, holy shit, to do anything, I'm signing 2 to 3 different transactions in a Rabby wallet. I mean, that's much better UX than MetaMask, but I mean, fuck, even still, it's like this idea of transferring money from this 24-digit string to this one, not clicking on the wrong links. Luckily, I've never been drained, so knock on wood. But, I have a friend who's been in crypto for many, many years that just lost 150K. Just boom, gone.
Rough.
Like late last week.
Yeah.
Gone. And like just literally
taken.
Semi-elaborate kind of scheme, but got essentially like a keylogging virus kind of thing that found that figured out there was a seed phrase somewhere that had been written down on the computer at like some distinct point in time and managed to get it and was like, thank you, out. And it's
crazy.
So even when you think that you're doing the right things, you haven't clicked a malicious link, you haven't signed a transaction, it's like the amount of vectors, unless you have this wonderfully tight OPSEC, which, let's face it, you're an ordinary person, you've probably made a mistake somewhere along the path. And it's funny because then that brings you back to the idea of having a bank. It's like, man, if only there was an organization I could trust to take care of this shit.
Yeah. I think the end game is things will probably run on cryptographic rails for these reasons, but you won't notice it. It'll be underlying. Like, that's the amazing thing Friendtech did. Awful people. I don't care who you are. You suck, honestly. What a parasitic junk thing to develop. I was on there. I played around with it first and realized this is just a popularity contest. This is like being in school again. This is
Join
idiotic.
my group. Buy my keys.
Yeah. Buy my keys.
It's the future of social media for some reason.
Racer or whatever just bailed for ages. Like, see you later. I got all my cash. I'm not doing this anymore. And now you can see the price of it. It's crap. It's a good first effort at something, maybe. But what that something is, I do not want to be involved. People love watching Black Mirror and getting scared and then making Black Mirror in real life. But yeah, the friend tech thing in terms of being able to get a wallet with just an email address, I think it was, or even just a Twitter account, I think it started with. That sort of level of like abstraction away from the nuts and bolts is where the best development is. I think there's I forgot the name of it. I want to give them a plug. The people who do that sort of email wallet creation. I think it was called Post something. I went to use it for something to integrate with something I was helping someone work on at one point. But that's amazing. It's little things like that just you don't think anything of it, but that's the real sort of
those seedless, gasless wallets will be
because then it just becomes an app button, press a thing, transfer money. You know what I mean? Like all this sorts of stuff that you want to have the ability to be private and have it yourself, but also be able to transfer other people and interact with things. Because most people aren't going to care about privacy in that sense. They want security, but they're not doing anything dodgy enough, or they trust enough of the government and centralized authority to be like, I feel comfortable with this sort of thing. But the UI, the UX part of it is the barrier, I think, at the moment.
Yeah. Well, that's quite a interesting contrast between, this perceived right to privacy, which I do strongly believe in, but then also this idea of like you need to build privacy into crypto, which again, I think is a useful application, but then let's not get horrified when it's turned around and used by things like Inferno Drainer or like any one of any one of those bots, or and again, like I don't think that the Tornado Cash dev should be in jail for writing some fucking code. Like I don't think that that's fair at all. It's fucking insane. No. But at the same time, it's like, well, when you make something like that, what's the function of it going to be? Who's it going to be used by? And yes, there will be people that are looking to preserve their privacy that don't want to have, like Vitalik uses Railgun all the time because he's like, hey, I don't want everyone knowing where I'm fucking sending money all the time, which is fair. When you're a figure like that and you have hundreds of people looking at Arkham and being like, what's this guy doing with his money today?
Solana, that's where he's going. Pump Dog Fun. That's what he's doing.
Pump Dog Fun.
Yeah. Guarantee it. He's over there. It's in that conference right now in Brussels, just on his phone, on Phantom. Yeah.
I'm getting the 8th beta of the new cat.
It's almost bonding. Go. It's almost gone to radium. Damn it. Didn't make it.
Just middle of the speech. Fuck yeah. Gone to radium. Sorry, guys. Sorry. Back to ZK compression. Anyway.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think that's a good place to wrap it up. No one.
Awesome.
Thanks so much for coming on the show, dude. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, dude.